Has Texas officially joined Georgia in college football's top tier, right? Seems like Georgia's kind of in a little bit of a tier of its own to start the college football season, at least with what our preseason projections are. Georgia's met those expectations to this point. Texas has played well. Ohio State's played well. Alabama played really well in week one, then struggled. Ole Miss is looking really good on offense, but they haven't really played anybody. A couple weeks of football have gone by, 3 if you count week 0, and experts are ready to fire off their takes, and now people are starting to talk about Texas, right? Impressive win, 52-0 over Colorado State, and then 31-12 over Michigan. It's got people at ESPN, it's got people around the country thinking that this Texas team might be on Georgia's level. So I'm here to talk about it. I'm here to share the opinions of others. Dean already shared Paul Feinbaum's opinion, which I wrote about on the website dogpost.com. Make sure you're checking out the link down below for our newsletter. Sign up for that; it's free. But he talked about Paul Feinbaum. I wrote about Paul Feinbaum. Before I share Greg McElroy's take, Booker McFarland's take, some other people's takes, let me read Feinbaum's again, real quick, in case you missed it. What he said about Georgia. Quotes: "I'm all in, and I know that is saying a great deal after watching Texas play yesterday." This was obviously on Sunday on SportsCenter. "But I feel like Georgia is a notch above. They'll get each other in the middle of October, and we can settle that. By the way, there's a chance Georgia and Texas could play 3 times this year, in October, in Atlanta in December, and sometime probably for the national championship. I think they are that elite, but I think Georgia is in a class of its own, and that's why I'm all in." That's what Paul Feinbaum had to say about Georgia. He's been pretty adamant that Georgia's number one this entire time. He hasn't really deviated from that opinion. Well, Greg McElroy, I was checking up on what Greg McElroy had to say about college football this past weekend, and he's in charge of the college football YouTube show. I can't remember the exact name of it, but ESPN's college football YouTube show. Greg McElroy hosts that, and he started off his number one segment in this show was to talk about why he thought Texas was in Georgia's tier, and just because they look physical. Quinn Ewers looks really good. They're hitting their offensive weapons haven't seemed to have dropped off the way people thought they might with A.D. Mitchell and Xavier Worthy gone. The defense has looked good. I've got my opinions about Texas, and I'm going to share them afterwards. This is one exact quote from Greg McElroy. He said, "Texas has officially joined Georgia as one of the most complete teams in the sport. They looked like a complete team, fast, physical, well coached, but that they join the Georgia Bulldogs." I think that McElroy has a good opinion. Some people don't like it, but he's been very pro-Georgia over the last few years. I mean, if you go through and pay attention to what he's been saying, he acknowledges, and right, because he was part of the Alabama dynasty for that decade. He was at the beginning of that. And Georgia's now entering a phase where it could turn into something like what Alabama accomplished. All right, is it going to be as good? Probably not, but it can turn into something like that. And he's been very truthful about that in his thinking and thinking that Georgia's really good. Well, now he thinks Texas is up there. Okay. After the game on Saturday, Georgia beat Tennessee Tech. I was watching some of the college football guys, and I think Booker McFarland's doing more college football content again. He was on the NFL for a couple of years, but they were breaking down Texas and they were breaking down Georgia, and Booker made this comment about Carson Beck and Quinn Ewers. When they were breaking down the Georgia game, he says they have the best quarterback in the country, not named Quinn Ewers. So he now thinks that Quinn Ewers is the best quarterback in college football. Almost every analyst, almost every website, everything, draft analysts, most people thought that Carson Beck, Georgia's quarterback, was the best quarterback in college football this season, that he is going to be the best quarterback in college football this season. Well, 2 weeks have gone by, and people are flipping on that opinion a little bit, and now the attention is a little bit more on Quinn Ewers for that, right? Booker is just an example, but if you go on social media too, right, that's a big part of our reality now. A lot of people think Quinn's better than Carson, and I'm not here necessarily to argue about Carson Beck and about Quinn Ewers. I'm here to talk about this Georgia-Texas conversation. Here's how I'm going to start it. I think Texas is really, really good. I do think this is an elite football team. I think that this is a team that's going to be in the college football playoff and competing for a national championship. It's just one of the handful of teams that I think has the capability of winning games like that in the playoff. I feel the same way about Georgia. I think it's too early to crown either team the best team in college football. Really, right? There's a current best team, and it's probably Georgia until, like it has been the last couple of years, Georgia until otherwise proven, because of how good they are, because of the championships, because of the roster, because they've got the best coach in college football. But what does back mean also? Right? Texas is back. We're back, all that. And this Texas is back has been kind of a meme. It's been kind of this joke over the last few years. What does back mean? All right, because I think depending on different people's definitions of Texas being back, they're back. All right? They're a top team in the country. They are a playoff contender. They're an SEC championship contender. They have one of the best quarterbacks in college football. And they have one of the best coaches in college football, who at least is becoming that, in Steve Sarkisian. So if being a competitor and competing for a national championship is back, then Texas is back. They made the college football playoff, the 14 playoff last year, and was really just a handful of plays away from competing against Michigan in the national championship. So I think in that term, Texas is probably back, right? Do they have to win a national championship to be back? I think that's a little bit ridiculous if we're being honest. So I think that we can stop with the Texas is back jokes. I don't know. That's just kind of my opinion. It's funny, and I get it, and horns down's funny and all that, but I just think that we're kind of moving on from that. Here's the truth about Texas. Destroyed Colorado State. Quinn Ewers looked really good, right? He did throw a pick in that game, but he looked pretty good. And the weapons kind of picked up where they left off. Isaiah Bond was a very good transfer portal receiver to go get. All right, one of the best receivers in college football is Isaiah Bond. He was Jalen Milroe, one of his favorite targets last year at Alabama. I think he'll have an even better season for Texas this year, and when the time comes, he will be a draft prospect, right? Maybe not a first-round pick, but certainly a top 3-round pick if you asked me. Matthew Golden is good. Jaden Blue's good. They've got a lot of guys on this Texas team that have been producing. Well, they go up there to Michigan, right? How good is Texas? We're going to find out. They got Michigan on the road. Michigan on the road at noon is different than Michigan on the road at night, just like it is for any team. Here's my thing about Michigan. I think they're worse than what people perceived them to be. I think I was a little wrong about them. I thought that Michigan was going to be a little better than what people thought, but it seems to me they're just about what they were, or maybe even a little worse. Struggled with Fresno State. That's fine. It's week 1, a new regime. But week 2, you just get thumped at home, and it's 24-3 at halftime, and you're losing. It's not a good look. Again, Quinn Ewers was very good. Texas ran the ball effectively, although it was by committee. It wasn't a fantastic running game, but it was good enough when you count the explosives. But they just went up there and dominated them. Michigan's offense is not as good as it was last year, and the defense is not as good as it was last year. So I don't want to overreact to Texas' win over Michigan, just like I didn't want to overreact to Georgia's win over Clemson. So far through 2 weeks, though, Georgia's win over Clemson I think is a little bit better than Texas' win over Michigan. My opinion there. I think that the win over Colorado State for Texas is more impressive than Georgia's 48-3 win over Tennessee Tech. So they're 2 games tit for tat, but when it comes to these big schools, I think Georgia was a little bit more impressive. What does it take? What will it take for me to really think Texas is on the tier with Georgia? Well, those things can change this season a little bit. Obviously, winning a national championship makes that different, but look, these are teams that are going to play head-to-head in October. And if Georgia beats Alabama, they're not going to lose to Auburn or Mississippi State. Georgia's going to go into Austin ranked number 1 in the country. And if Texas keeps winning football games, they're going to be ranked number 2, 3 at worst in the country, right? Ohio State, if they start going crazy, is going to jump back over Texas in the rankings. Don't make a mistake about that. People still feel very highly about Ohio State. It's going to be settled on the field, right? At least this year. Now, like Feinbaum was saying, they could play more than once. They could play 3 times if you include an SEC championship, which is a possibility, and a game in the playoff. We're going to learn about it then. Who's better in the playoff, Georgia, Texas? That's when it's really going to matter. It won't matter as much in October as it will in December when playoff games are rolling around. Who's better in the SEC championship matters. Alabama has been better than Georgia in the SEC championship. In games that matter, Alabama's been better than Georgia. Georgia winning national championships and beating Bama once in that mix is what it took for people to say that Georgia was ahead of Alabama's level. So I don't want to hear it necessarily when you say Texas is on Georgia's level. They've got to beat Georgia, and I know they beat Georgia. That was a totally different world in 2018. far away from now. That's been far away now, right? They've got to be Georgia. That's my opinion.